He had planned it for 6 weeks. He had spoken to her manager, her closest friend, her choreographer, and 3 members of her touring crew. He had timed it down to the minute, choosing the exact moment in the set when the energy was highest and the cameras were rolling and 10,000 people were already on their feet. He had the ring, he had the speech, he had thought of everything except her answer. Because when Marcus Reeves dropped to one knee in the center of that stage on a Tuesday night in Chicago in the summer of 1993 and held up a diamond ring and looked up at the woman he had loved for 2 years and said the 4 words that he had rehearsed 100 times, Madonna did not say yes. She did not say no. She said something that nobody in that arena, nobody watching the footage that circulated for years afterward, nobody who has ever told this story expected her to say. And what she said, and what happened in the hours after she said it, is one of the most honest and quietly devastating love stories that has never been fully told. To understand it, you have to understand who Marcus was, and who Madonna was, and what it meant for those 2 people to be in the same room, let alone the same relationship. Marcus Reeves was not famous. That was the first thing everyone noticed about him, because everyone who had ever been close to Madonna before had been in some way famous. Musicians, actors, directors, people who existed in the same stratospheric atmosphere she inhabited. Marcus was a photographer, a genuinely gifted one, the kind of photographer whose work you stop in front of at a gallery because it makes you feel something you didn't know you needed to feel. But he was not famous. He had not been on magazine covers. He had not been the subject of profiles or speculation. He was a man who made beautiful things quietly, and he had walked into Madonna's orbit at a dinner party in Los Angeles in the spring of 1991, and had not, unlike almost everyone else in that room, treated her like Madonna. He had talked to her about a photograph he had seen in a book about Italian Renaissance painting. He had argued with her about it, gently but completely, when she disagreed with his interpretation. He had laughed at something she said without the half-second delay that famous people always notice. That tiny pause where someone is calculating how funny they're allowed to find you. He had just laughed, immediately, because it was funny. She called her friend the next morning and said, "I met someone strange last night." Strange was her word for interesting. Her friend understood this. They started seeing each other quietly, which was difficult when one of you is one of the most photographed women on the planet, but they managed it with the particular ingenuity of 2 people who are motivated to manage it. He didn't come to her events. She went to his world instead. His studio, his neighborhood in Silver Lake, the small restaurant 3 blocks from his apartment, where the owner knew him by name, and where no one looked up when they walked in. She loved it more than she had expected to love it. The invisibility of it, the ordinariness. He loved her in the way that people who are not intimidated by you love you, which is the most useful and terrifying kind of love there is. He said things to her that her employees couldn't say, and her collaborators were afraid to say, and even her friends sometimes softened before they delivered. He told her when she was wrong. He told her when something wasn't working. He told her when she was being difficult in a way that was hurting people around her. She fought with him every time. And then, usually by the next morning, she knew he was right. 2 years in, the relationship had survived things that relationships between people with unequal public profiles rarely survive. The photographers who eventually found them. The articles that were written about him as an accessory to her story, rather than a person with his own. The long stretches of time when the tour or the film or the album pulled her into a schedule that left no room for ordinary life, for his life, for the dinners at the restaurant 3 blocks from his apartment, where the owner knew him by name. He had stayed. Every time she had expected him to decide that the cost was too high, he had stayed. And that staying had come to mean more to her than she had words for. which was a remarkable thing for a woman who had always had words for everything. He told her 3 weeks before the Chicago concert that he wanted to propose. He did not ask her permission. He told her. He said, "I'm going to ask you to marry me, and I want you to know that's coming, because I think you deserve to know that's coming, but I'm not telling you when or where." She had stared at him. Then she had said, "That's either the most romantic thing anyone has ever said to me, or the most terrifying." He had smiled and said, "Probably both." She had thought about it every day for 3 weeks. She had thought about it in the way that big questions live in you when you know they're coming. Not constantly on the surface, but always present underneath, coloring everything else. She thought about what it would mean, what she would be saying yes to, and what she would be saying no to, and whether those were even the right questions. She knew she loved him. That was not the question. The question was something older and harder than love. On the night of the Chicago concert, she walked out on that stage and performed the first 90 minutes of the set with the particular intensity that her crew had learned to read as something more than professional commitment. She was inside the music in a different way that night. Something was happening underneath the surface of the show. Marcus was in the wings. She could see him from the stage, standing in the shadows just off the lights, watching her the way he always watched her perform. Not with the stunned admiration of a fan, but with the focused attention of someone who genuinely sees you. She had told him once that he was the only person she'd ever performed in front of who she felt was actually watching her and not the character she played on stage. He had said, "Those are the same person." She had thought about that for a long time. With 40 minutes left in the set, during the pause between psalms, when the crowd was at its loudest, Marcus walked out onto the stage. 10,000 people saw him before she did. A ripple went through the crowd. Confusion first, then recognition for those who knew who he was, then a collective understanding of what was about to happen that moved through the arena like a wave. By the time she turned around and saw him standing there in the middle of the stage with the ring in his hand and the lights hitting him from every direction, and 10,000 people holding their breath, the arena was so quiet you could hear the rigging above the stage. He dropped to one knee. He said the 4 words. She stood completely still. She looked at him for a long moment, a moment that the people in that arena would describe afterward in 100 different ways, as lasting seconds or minutes or hours, because time does strange things when you are watching a real thing happen in a place that is usually reserved for performance. And then she said, "Stand up, please." She took the hand that was holding the ring and held it in both of hers. She looked at him in a way that everyone in that arena could see was not a performance. And she said, into the microphone, so that 10,000 people and the cameras and the crew and the entire weight of the public moment could hear her, "I love you more than I have loved anything. And I can't say yes on a stage. I can't give you an answer that belongs to 10,000 people. You deserve an answer that belongs only to you." The arena was silent. She held his hand tighter, and then she said one more thing, quietly, but the microphone caught it. "Ask me again, tonight, when it's just us." He looked at her for a moment, then he closed the ring box, he nodded once, and he walked off the stage. 10,000 people did not know what they had just witnessed. The response that moved through the crowd was not the explosion of joy that a yes produces, or the devastated silence that a no produces. It was something more complicated, something that took people a few seconds to process. And when they did, when they understood what she had actually said and why she had said it, the arena erupted in a sound that her crew would describe for years afterward as unlike anything they had heard before. Not screaming, not cheering, something between the two, a release, a recognition, the sound of 10,000 people understanding something true about love at the same moment. She finished the concert, all 40 minutes of it. She sang every song she had planned to sing. She did not cry on stage, though people in the front rows said her eyes were bright in a way that was clearly not the lights. She was present in the performance in a way that felt different from the first 90 minutes, looser somehow, like something heavy had been set down. After the show, after the crew had cleared out and the arena had emptied and the tour buses were waiting in the loading dock, she found Marcus in her dressing room. He was sitting on the couch with the ring box on the table in front of him and a cup of cold coffee that he hadn't drunk. She sat down next to him. He opened the ring box. He looked at her, and he asked her again. She said yes. No stage, no crowd, no cameras, no microphone, just the two of them, in a dressing room in Chicago, with cold coffee and her ring, and 40 years of life ahead of them that would turn out to be nothing like either of them planned, because life is always nothing like you plan, and the people who love you through the unplanned parts are the ones who matter. The footage from the stage proposal circulated for years. It was written about in the way that public moments involving Madonna were always written about, with analysis and opinion and takes from people who had never been in a relationship anything like theirs and felt qualified to judge it anyway. Some people said it was the most romantic thing they had ever seen. Some people said she had humiliated him. Some people missed the point entirely and wrote about it as though it were a statement about marriage as an institution, rather than what it actually was, which was one person telling another person, "You matter too much for this to be a performance." Marcus was asked about it once, years later, in an interview that was primarily about his photography. The interviewer brought it up near the end, clearly expecting him to deflect. He didn't. He said, "She did the most loving thing anyone has ever done for me that night. She protected the moment from the audience. She understood that some things, if you let them be public, stop being real. And she wanted what we had to be real." He paused. "It always was," he said. "That was the whole point." What Madonna understood that night, in the middle of a stage with 10,000 people watching, was something that takes most people a lifetime to learn, and some people never learn at all. That the most important moments of your life cannot be performed. They can only be lived. And if you are lucky enough to be with someone who understands that, who will close the ring box and walk off the stage and wait for you in a quiet room, that is not a man who failed to get the answer he wanted. That is a man who already had it. She knew that, standing on that stage with the lights and the crowd and the cameras, she knew it completely. And she made a choice that cost her something. The simplicity of yes, the explosion of joy, the moment that would have been replayed on every entertainment program for weeks, in favor of something that couldn't be filmed. Some of the best things can't be filmed. Some of the best things happen in dressing rooms, in the dark, after the crowd has gone home, when it is just two people and a ring and the truth. If this story made you feel something you weren't expecting, leave it in the comments. We want to know. Hit that like button and subscribe, and share this with someone who understands that the most important moments in love are the ones nobody else sees. Ring that notification bell, because the next story we're bringing you is just as real as this one.